a beautiful thing. It grows to the quiver of a fife that sings. I can take it with the wave of my hand and place it upon my music stand. Such a beautiful thing. Such a beautiful thing.
Do that so everyone
The world is a marvelous show.
can get the speaker view set up. Okay, so my talk for today, dredging for miracles. I always find these talks to be, the process to be very interesting and sometimes challenging. But it was actually Reverend Tony who requested that I do the introduction for the Miracles Weekly, that is our electronic version that goes out. And he said, well, why don't you link it to your talk? And I thought, oh, what a brilliant idea. Okay, so that's what I did. So you may have gotten a little, if you read the introduction to Miracles Weekly, you may have gotten a little introduction to this. So a little bit of it may sound familiar to you. Dredging for miracles. So as a young boy growing up in the south part of New Jersey, which I informed Reverend Vincent yesterday, many people don't know what that actually means, but I actually grew up very near Philadelphia. In fact, if you climbed a tree in my backyard, you could actually see the skyline of Philadelphia. So I wasn't that far away, because it's now popular amongst my softball teammates to tease me because I've told them for years I'm from Philadelphia. And then I did at some point say, well, I grew up in South Jersey, which was right near Philadelphia. But now everyone likes to tease me, oh, you're actually from South Jersey, you're not from Philadelphia. But to correct the record, I did live in Philadelphia for 10 years before I moved out here. So it's just when you move to a new place, you oftentimes, you don't say you're from South Jersey, people don't know where that is, so you say from the nearest metropolitan city, which is Philadelphia. So I'm just correcting the record so that Reverend Vincent and everyone else understands. So as when I grew up in South Jersey, I was, every year and oftentimes during the summer, we went down to the New Jersey shore, which I think has become now popularized as the Jersey Shore because of that show that was on MTV years ago. And it was a great time, a lot of memories, and just being in the ocean, swimming in the ocean, being with family. It was kind of a respite from, the rest of life, which was always very interesting. But one of the things that we used to see when we went down the shore to the beach was we used to see these large machines, and we just they were dredgers. And because the beach economy, what's so essential to the beach economy is to actually have a beach. What they used to do is have these large barges with these vacuum-like structures that would go down into the harbors or into the inlets, or actually out in the ocean itself, and bring up sand and put them on the barge. Because what happened is the natural erosion from the ocean would actually start wearing away the beaches. So the local economy needed to bring in sand to fight this erosion. So besides making sometimes the harbors deeper for ships, they also had to do this to replace the sand on the beaches. So they were essentially dredging this sand for the use on the beach in order to keep the beach economy going and people wanting to come there to spend their summers on the beach. So I thought about this and I said, this is actually a pretty good analogy for the process of miracles. From today's reading, Reverend Vincent read this. You are accustomed to the notion that the mind can see the source of pain where it is not. The doubtful service of such displacement is to hide the real source of guilt and keep it from full awareness, the full perception that it is insane. And so my thought is this, is that sometimes we are often fooled by our perceptions. We think with our senseless senses. In other words, we see and hear and take in information from the external world, and it at times upsets us. Now, you might say to me, hey, Reverend Peter, you'd be insane not to believe that the world is insane. Well, I get that. I watch the news and I see all kinds of things that happen. I look outside my window here on Cumberland Street, and sometimes I see interesting things happening as well. And I experience my own life. But what the Course in Miracles is challenging us to do and asking us to do is to dredge for the miracles. It's asking us to take our spiritual tools and look for the miracle. Now, the miracle is sometimes not easily accessible. It's like peeling an onion. You may not realize it, and we may not sometimes realize it, but the enemy of the miracle is our ego. And what is that? Well, we know the enemy of the ego is our fear. It's the guilt. It's the hot potato guilt that we want to get rid of, right? You know, like it says in the first paragraph in our reading, displacement. The hot potato. Who's to blame? I'm not to blame. Get rid of it. Give it to somebody else. Right? I used to coach high school football, and at times during the game, sometimes at halftime or during a timeout, it's a very intense, emotional thing, right? And I go in the locker room or I come out in the field for a timeout, and the kids would be in the huddle, and they'd be like, "No, you were supposed to block him. No, it was your fault. No, it was your fault. You dropped the pass. Blah blah blah." And I used to tell them, hey, guys, stop the blame game, right? But in truth, the blame game happens everywhere and all the time, and oftentimes with us. So what we're often doing is we're dredging in the wrong place. When we perceive with the ego, we're dredging in guilt. We're looking for someone else to blame. And it's a natural default for us to kind of want to do this, because it's so endemic to the ego. It's so easy to look and use our simple perception to blame others. Now, I just want you to take a minute as I'm speaking here and think of this. Think of a situation or think of a person that's bothering you, that's going on in your life right now. And then just say to yourself, where is the guilt? Who am I blaming for this? Course in Miracles says this: you who have been unmerciful to yourself do not remember your Father's love. And looking without mercy upon your brothers, you do not remember how much you love him. And so whatever came to mind when I asked you, who were you blaming? Where was the guilt? Maybe it was another person, maybe it was a family member, maybe it was a lover, maybe it was a partner, maybe it was an institution, maybe it was a political party, maybe it was an ideology. Whoever it might have been, unless your answer was, who is to blame, was the guilt in your mind, then like today's lesson says, I want the peace of God, we're not going to get to the peace of God until we realize the actual causation. And the actual causation of our upsetment is in our minds. It's accepting that interpretation that either we are guilty, we see plenty of instances of people harming themselves, or our brother and sisters or others are guilty. And as long as we see that, we're not going to have the peace of God. We really, truly have to go back into our own minds and change the interpretation, the focus. And we have to be willing to do that and look at it from that standpoint. Now, we know that that's kind of counterintuitive to our sensory apparatus, right? Kind of intuitive to that. Okay, so how to apply this? So I'm wearing this shirt today. Some of you know I wear this shirt from time to time at the talks. I wear some various versions of Hawaiian shirts, but I'm wearing this one for a reason. It's the shirt I wore that actually was in a meme that was created from something that I did in 2017. So in 2017, I had just come back from vacation from Mexico in Puerto Vallarta, which was a lot of fun. And I was beginning to go back, and we had a big teacher meeting. It's actually funny. It was at the Catholic Cathedral here in San Francisco in one of their meeting rooms. And there was 500 special ed teachers. I'm a special ed teacher in the room. And we were getting this presentation from the state on how to do our job, basically. And they were teaching us as if we were first year college students. So somehow I just was inspired. I think I've spoken about this before, but one of the presenters said, "Does anyone have any questions?" And this is totally unplanned. I raised my hand and I said, "Yes, I have a question." And I stood up. And for 20 minutes, I questioned why we were getting a professional development like this presentation for us, because it was really not appropriate. They were giving us a presentation. It was like if you were a high school senior and they were teaching you how to do simple mathematics, addition. And so I went on for 20 minutes and I had these conversations with various members of the state California Department of Education, from my own chief of special ed. And they were telling me, I was basically advocating. I said, look, they were giving us more bureaucratic work to do. And I was saying, we don't need any more bureaucratic work. We need professional development on how to better teach students with disabilities, and so on and so forth. And people started, kind of, were actually supporting me in kind of what I was saying. So the point of this is, I guess, is to say, is that at that point in time, I got a nickname within the school district, and they began to call me Spedicus. And there was a whole meme that went around within the school district about this. And it was based off the Spartacus, the leader from the slave who led a slave revolt against the Romans and actually almost prevailed back in ancient history. And so from that point in time, I got this reputation of someone who speaks truth to power. And after this event took place, I had like people from the union come up, oh my God, if they try to file grievances against you or do some kind of disciplinary action, blah, blah, blah. But I was a Course in Miracles student. So I was like, I went up to and talked to the head of special ed and all these people. And I said, look, it wasn't personal. I was just advocating for a different type of professional development. So they never took action against me, even though I held up the meeting for at least 20 minutes or whatever. And they finally just told me that the funny thing is that the way they were engaging with me and they couldn't get me to sit down. And the way I sat down was they finally told me, well, you can leave if you want. And I never thought they would say that to me. I'm like, you're going to tell me to leave? You're not going to try to, we're not going to try to come to some solutions here or try to do something different. And I didn't know what to say at that point. So I sat down. But the point was this, is that was spirit, right? That was spirit guiding me. I didn't plan this. I had no idea what this professional development was going to be. But then I then had this reputation, and I would continue to do this. So it was something that was just part of my nature, that I would speak truth to power. And, you know, it kind of was part of my history. The same thing happened when I was younger. When I came out in 1989 and 1990, I became part of this gay Catholic church. It was called Dignity. And we used to go to the cathedral and protest when the bishop would come out with, or cardinal at that time, would come out with these homophobic, you know, at that point in time, domestic partnership was on the, you know, the city of Philadelphia was trying to pass domestic partnership laws. We had the AIDS crisis, and they would say all kinds of horrible things about us and so on. So we would go in church and we would stand up and we would protest. And we had this little guy, Father Jim, I can't remember his last name, an Irish guy, and he would go up and, you know, he would lead the kind of protest at the end of the service when the Catholic cardinal would get up and read this opposition to gay rights. So anyway, I had this in my background. Well, something recently has kind of happened where I moved schools. In my previous schools, folks knew who I was, and I would speak up at my old school for students with disabilities when I felt like their rights were being violated. So I went to this new school, and over the past couple years, um, I had a different response. I would still speak up when I felt things were wrong, but I noticed that sometimes I can be kind of a difficult personality, and I was angry, and I got angry with my supervisors. And I've had two different supervisors over the past 2 years, and I've learned that when you get angry with some supervisors, they make accusations against you. And so over the past couple of years, I've had accusations made toward me because I have, in my mind, I have spoken up about situations that I felt were wrong. And I actually never, I didn't realize that when you spoke up that you would have this. But, you know, what's the miracle, right? What's the dredging of the miracle? It's been a very painful lesson because I've been called kind of the accusations that have been made against me are extraordinarily painful. And I don't want to get into the actual specifics of them, but it was something that I never thought people would accuse me of. And so I thought to myself, well, what's going on here? So it's been, like I said, it's been a dredging process because it's really caused me to dig deep into my own psyche in a way and say, what's going on? So the first lesson that I've gotten from the Holy Spirit is that, you know, supervisors or pseudo supervisors, because some people have supervisory power over you in institutions that I work in that they don't really have the qualifications for, um, they don't like it when you challenge their authority. And so what they do is, you know, if you're angry when you do these challenges, they kind of make accusations and they charge things that I don't think are really part of what's going on in the perception of the situation. So the lesson for me, I think, is that the Holy Spirit definitely is speaking to me and is telling me to speak truth to power and has throughout my whole life. But at the same time, I perhaps need to be more artful in speaking to some people because it does trigger their authority issues. And perhaps maybe I have some authority issues that I am working on. And so I need to also to look at that. And so I've gotten at least that lesson. I'm still not sure sometimes how to answer these allegations, and I've had mediation meetings. They don't ever seem to work all that well. But maybe perhaps I have to get a higher level of mediator in there or something. I don't know. Because I always feel like I'm coming from honesty and I even take part. I say, look, I was pissed off. Yeah, I shouldn't have said it in this way, blah, blah, blah. But I notice they never do that. I don't know what it is. They don't say that. And maybe I don't know, maybe because they're not maybe coming from a spiritual perspective, but I'm just like, hey, this is me. This is my honest thing. Yeah, I could have said it better. Sorry, but let's, deal with the issue. Well, I don't always get that in return. So it's very interesting. Anyway, today is July 4th, 2021. That means our country is 245 years old today. And The truth of the matter is, I'm actually rewatching John Adams. It's an HBO series on, or it's an HBO series about the life of John Adams. And it's very fascinating, and I recommend it to anyone. This is actually the third time that I've watched it because as a young boy, I was inspired by history, and I used to love to read about the presidents. And I am quite challenged recently. I've been quite challenged, and those of you, my friends, know that recently by these work events and life events that have been going on. So I actually bought a book on Theodore Roosevelt over there too. So it's been like an old pattern of mine to go back and see this inspiration. But it's very interesting because if you do go back to those early days in our republic, what you do find is that there was a real zest for freedom, and there was a real concern, and people were really, really involved in their governance. And unfortunately, I just have to report that 245 years later, I think we've lost a lot of that. And now I know it's the perceptual world, and I know that the true freedom does not come from our government. True spiritual freedom, today's lesson reports that. But I don't think that we can be in denial that corporations basically have undue influence over our government. Our own Supreme Court even said that they are equal in rights and privilege to people, which to me is absurd. People of color have all kinds of disadvantages in terms of housing, in terms of education, in terms of healthcare, the legal system, and so on and so forth. As a person part of the LGBTQ plus community, it's still legally permissible for people to be discriminated against because of that one of those designations, because you're lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual, queer, whatever. You can still not get fired from a job in many states. You can still lose your housing. You can still be denied health care and discriminated against. I've talked about in here and other places our own country, because it mostly pursues our self-interest. It doesn't really pursue the principles of freedom in the world. And I've experienced that. I talked about my trip to Central America when I was a young man. I experienced that as well. So where is the hope in all this? Well, the hope is that recently we have seen people really on both sides of the political spectrum clamor for freedom, whether it has been Black Lives Matter or Portland and Seattle, or for people that were saying that the restrictions placed on individual freedoms during COVID were too extreme. I actually see all those causes as similar. It is people speaking up, guided by the Holy Spirit, and saying they don't want the undue burden of the government trying to control us. And so we still have to have these circumstances. A Course in Miracles says this: the power of decision is my own. Real freedom lies in the choices we make. Course in Miracles teaches us that script is already written, folks. We know that the events and circumstances in our lives are going to happen. The accusations that were made against me this year at work were part of the script. The power of decision I have is I can forgive my brothers and sisters who made those accusations, and that will release me from the guilt and hate that I sometimes feel. And it is same for us as a people and as a country, that our true freedom comes from the choices we make. Sometimes it's the only choice we have. It may not look the way we want in our external life, but we know from countless examples of mystics throughout the century living in terrible situations and terrible conditions, and with people in our own lives and our own experience, that the dark companions of the ego may exist. These thoughts may come to us of guilt and hate and rage, but it's not our essence. Our true freedom lies in the ability to choose and to experience the peace of God. And we experience that peace of God when we forgive ourselves and others and see ourselves as completely innocent. Thanks. That's my talk for today. Happy 4th of July, everybody.
A flower is a beautiful thing. It grows to the quiver of a fife that sings. I can take it with the wave of my hand and place it upon my music stand. Such a beautiful thing. Such a beautiful thing.